Welcome to Season 2 of the Parkinson's podcast Unfiltered, with hosts Heather Kennedy and Kat Hill, brought to you by the Davis-Phinney Foundation. Heather is originally from New York and was diagnosed with young-onset Parkinson's in 2011 when she was 40. Kat is originally from a small town in California and was diagnosed in 2015 when she was 48. Heather and Kat have been friends since they met at the World Parkinson Congress in 2019. In this season, Heather and Kat will be joined by Chris Kruger, a Davis-Phinney Foundation staff member who was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2020 when he was 37. In each episode this season, Heather and Kat will dive deep into the raw emotion and realities of living with Parkinson's as they share stories and discuss questions they've received from people in the Parkinson's community. If you have a question to ask or story to share, please visit dpf.org/unfiltered. That's dpf.org/unfiltered.
Here's our first question from Kathy. Kathy wrote and said, I'd like to hear more about apathy. Kat spoke about it on one of the Davis-Phinney Foundation webinars, and I was encouraged by hearing what she had to say. I've had Parkinson's since 2018, and I'm 66. Thanks for writing in, Kathy.
Yeah. I'm going to try to be funny. I have no opinion. No, just kidding. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Have you guys felt periods of apathy?
Oh, yes. Where the phone feels like 1,000 pounds and everything feels so labored. I just don't have the time, energy, or gumption, as they say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I encountered this last night. I had to edit some video for the foundation the other night just to get something moving down the pipeline. And I hit this wall and I was like, I couldn't really bring myself to move the mouse until I was just like, oh, come on. You know, it was just, I just couldn't get it going. And so, yeah, I get this sometimes too. It's usually in the afternoon, late afternoon or early evening for me. Mornings, I'm usually ready to go. I'm eager to get things done. But in the afternoon and evening, it doesn't always work that way for me. Sometimes I get hit.
Is that when you make your plans?
Well, that is the problem, right? I mean, you end up, in my situation, I'm working a full-time job, so I don't necessarily have the same time to do the other things I might do during the day. I mean, I can move around my schedule somewhat, but yeah, I end up with a lot of time in the evening when that's my time to do things that I would want to do otherwise besides work, and I get hit by the wallop of apathy sometimes. So it can be really hard.
And I think there's this combination of things, right? So our bodies, our muscles, with all the movement or lack of movement, makes us stiffer. It takes more like psychological energy to get our bodies moving and keep them moving. So there's like this cheer factor, this passion factor that needs to happen to get our bodies to move. And then for me, the flip side of that is that it's hard to get my body moving and keep it moving when I don't feel like it matters. And that's the apathy. I've always been kind of a passionate person about things. I have a lot of feelings about a lot of things, and that's not always good, but that's who I am. And what I've noticed with Parkinson's is I feel like those feelings are flattened.
Yeah.
Do you feel that, Heather?
Yes. It feels like, and I don't want to flatten the experience of Parkinson's for us either. I want to just say that the flattening feeling is real. That's a chemical response to this.
Yes. You know, we know that we don't make dopamine in the way that we should when we have Parkinson's. And so we try all these things to work around it, to optimize what dopamine we have, to take synthetic that looks like it. But there are other neurotransmitters that affect mood and passion. I'm not sure. I'm not going to say that word, but serotonin is another neurotransmitter that can really be impacted. And a lot of us are affected by mood. There are higher rates of depression and anxiety, right, Heather?
Yes. And the epinephrine and the feel-good chemistry that we're missing makes us feel as if we're doing something wrong. My mother said to me yesterday, I wish I had a happy pill to just give you. Why can't you just be happy? She didn't mean it as a toxic positivity thing. But in her age group, in her generation, she's 82.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just get over yourself, of course, right?
Right. How about you, Chris? What do you feel this too? And what do you do? What do you guys do?
It's funny, another thing that happened to me yesterday before I hit the wall with the video work I was doing, I didn't know where it came from, but a song popped into my head. I feel like songs are always my ticket. And I don't know that I think a lot of people have that experience, especially maybe with freezing of gait. You know, music and rhythm can help people get out of that. But for me, it also helps me get into the rhythm of feeling motivated. I get excited when I hear certain songs. And I think there's other things that work like that for me too. You know, if I see something really beautiful that somebody accomplishes in terms of like an athletic achievement, for example, I enjoy watching sports. And so I'll if I see somebody really succeed in something, that can get me jazzed up, you know? So I think finding ways to sort of augment my excitement by things that reliably get me to that point really helps. And sometimes it's luck, and sometimes, you know, I can sort of make it happen by knowing that I like to listen to certain songs or types of music.
I think that the underlying thing is that we've all experienced it. I know for me, having commitments to other people keep me getting up and going, keep me showing up. Having a commitment to this podcast keeps me engaged, even if I'm feeling kind of flat. And what I've noticed, excuse me, is that the more I show up, the more I feel better. And so what I'd love to say, Kathy, is don't give up. Don't give up on what you're doing and who you're committed to. I also have now been 11 years into this, and Heather, you've been on this journey longer, have seen the up and downs. So some of that apathy seems to pass over time and then come back. It's familiar. I try to accept that it doesn't mean it's going to be here forever, and also getting help for it. I think if it's really disabling and preventing you from doing the things you need to do, like exercise and take care of yourself and engage with your friends and family, there's help out there. There's foundation. There's lots of information on the internet. There's also counseling and all kinds of resources. So
yeah. So one thing I would say about that is, you know, we talk with neuropsychologists sometimes at the Davis Phinney Foundation. We have Mark Mapstone joins us from time to time. He's a member of our science advisory board. And, you know, there's different types of support you can get. So, you know, maybe it's a psychologist, maybe it's a licensed family counselor, maybe it's a neuropsychologist, maybe there's psychiatric support you might benefit from. So I think it's important to talk to if you do think you want to get some attention from a professional on this, with anything really, talk to your care team about it and see what the people you're already talking with think about the right person for you to see.
Check those meds too. Meds can bring you down and depress you. Some of the medications will submerge you so much that you can't really feel pleasure, such as the delayed orgasm and some of the antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds.
Uh-huh.
But can I recommend something?
Yes.
I make a juice list for myself. Like, what gives you juice? What gives you?
Ooh,
Do you want to make you feel alive? But you want to stay juicy. You don't want to give up and say, I'm just disabled, nobody loves me, and poor me. I'm going to the nursing home. Which I plan on doing sometime because I think it would be fun. But for now, what gives me juice is love, letting go, letting go, letting go.
Letting go.
It's hard.
It is hard. Letting go of control, letting go of thinking you have really control over anything.
Kat, you taught me a lot about that. In fact, can I just mention, the reason that we're here today is because Kat and Chris picked up so much of the slack. I was supposed to deliver some very simple things and I couldn't find them. For whatever reason, technically, I had done some things wrong. And they've been so patient with me, so utterly accepting of what is happening right now. They don't need to understand my reality, although they do. They don't need to understand what I'm going through to understand that I'm struggling. They trust me. And they showed up today and they gave 110%. Thank you. We carry each other.
Yeah, you know, I want to draw attention to something, and I hope you don't mind that I do this, Heather, but Heather sometimes has said on this podcast, talked about the ways that she's been having a hard time, and I don't want to assume that Heather wants to go into all the details of that, but it's worth saying that, this Parkinson's can really get tough, and in ways that are different for every person. And Heather's gone through some stuff these recent months, and I am learning from Heather as I talk with her about the things she's going through, and seeing some real courage that she's exhibiting.
Indeed. Courage and also realness. I love that she's able to be real with us here on this podcast and real with us as friends, Chris.
I don't want to draw too much of attention on this because I recognize that it's private in some sense too, but I also know that it's just really hard. And I want to just say for our listeners that you may be experiencing things that are hard that we're not talking about right now. And maybe we haven't talked about it yet, but we recognize that everybody's path in regards to Parkinson's is different. You know, the things that are most challenging for us, maybe the things that are easy for you, and maybe the things that are easier for you are really challenging for us. So, you know, I don't know. I just want to draw attention to the fact that, you know, we'd love to hear from you about your experience. So if you have a question about something that we're not talking about, please send it to us at dpf.org/unfiltered. And, you know, we'll be happy to talk about the things that you're going through and share some perspectives on it. And maybe, you know, maybe you can help us bring some attention to something that isn't being talked about broadly enough. So please let us know at dpf.org/unfiltered. So let's move on to our next question. So this is a question that came in anonymously, and it came from a conversation we had in a previous episode. The person asked a pretty straightforward question. What's the limit? When do you decide you're too disabled? And I would say that the question is both straightforward and not straightforward at all, because I think the question is just too disabled for what? And I think that's kind of the point of the question, because it could be with regards to work. It could be with regards to making it to the podcast recording. It could be with regards to getting to the dog park or gardening. It could be with regard to anything. So how do you decide when you need to let go, as was discussed earlier?
And I'm going to pose one other question that Heather brought up. When are you too disabled to live alone? When are you too disabled to drive? When are you too disabled to have quality of life? For me, this question sparked a broad dialogue about some of those things. And I think it also depends on your faith. It depends on your family and your resources. But I also think it's about how you define quality of life. And I think it's important that all of us, Parkinson's, no Parkinson's, that we are talking about end of life things. We're talking about things that are universal. We all are born, we all live, and we all die. And many of us pay taxes.
Many death and taxes.
Death and taxes.
Yes, memento mori.
Memento mori.
We're all going to die.
We're all going to die.
But the good part of that is everything is transient. Everything is temporary.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes the pressure off too. I wouldn't want to live forever. How awful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like being famous. It's how awful.
There's another layer to that too. The idea of disability is complicated because it's not a single straightforward path. So that's where the limit, you know, there is a limit, but you might go backwards away from the limit. You might find yourself more able at another time. So that's where it really gets tricky.
You might learn a new tool. There might be a new medicine. There might be a new shift in your world that allows you to find joy and creativity some other ways. I think for me, the important part is the fluidity of it. But I also think that it starts to get scary and it starts to get real when you are feeling smaller and smaller and physically able to do less. And I think it's important that we're talking about it, not as a poor me or asking for sympathy or playing the victim, but more in the reality of this is what matters to me about quality of life. And I know I am honored to know many people with the disease. I also am really honored to have a friend who has ALS. And she's been a friend of mine for over 3 decades. And she's having to make some pretty clear decisions of where she wants to go and where she doesn't. And things like assisted living, or do I want to be intubated at the end of life? A lot of this are in all of the advanced directives that we're all encouraged to sign, Parkinson's or no Parkinson's. And I think sparking a dialogue with those that you love and care about is important. And so I would encourage our listener, Anonymous, to have even self-reflection. What is too disabled for what and for them? And to make some leaps to dialogue. But I think if we can talk about it with the people we care about and think about what is quality of life to us, when I can do less physically, can I find joy and fulfillment and peace? If I need to make a transition to assisted living, are there ways for me to find joy in that? Are there ways that my partner and I can talk about getting some help if it's getting burdensome? I don't know. I'm brainstorming off the cuff here.
I love that. How do we slow down? or be dragged for me. I had to learn this the hard way. I was forced to slow down. How about you, Chris?
I've been thinking about my own experience with refereeing. I've been a referee of soccer and basketball for a long time, almost 15 years. And I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, if I get on the soccer field and I'm reffing and something stressful happens and my tremor really gets aggravated, what does that do to the game? I have to think about this in terms of what's good for the game I'm reffing. I'm capable of making the decisions I need to make, but if somebody sees me with my tremor and they think I'm nervous and then it escalates a situation, I think, so what have I been doing with that? I'm getting more involved in the mentoring of the younger referees and finding a way to stay involved. And maybe at some point I'm not going to be able to do that very well. And I'll end up just watching the games from the sidelines and enjoying the games in that way. I don't know. It's something that I think about for my own self with regards to some of the things I really love to do that are getting harder all the time.
I know for me that I had to really think about what it meant having a diagnosis and working and delivering babies and working in a high-risk obstetric situation. I transitioned out of work and I really miss that. And I also realize there's lots of other things that I can do and other ways I contribute. Thus, I get to be here with you, beautiful people, talking about, or philosophizing about this stuff. So I hope there's a level of contribution that I add here.
Are you serious? You're a godsend. We don't always agree either. Kat and I can come to blows on things, and Kat is so graceful at her explanations. For example, I was very critical of someone who's public. I was really bashing them. And I caught myself because Kat paused and she didn't say anything back. She didn't say, you shouldn't talk about people like that. I ended up having a conversation with that person directly, which reminded me, hey, stay in your lane. Just do your thing. Focus on what you can change and make sure that you know that comparing yourself to how you used to be, being bitter that they have more ability than you do right now, it's not going to be helpful to anybody. What can you do? What can you do to add to the good stuff? What can you do to learn a new thing?
So that draws my attention to a couple things, and I want to plug the work of Dr. Benzie Kluger.
It's great. I love him.
And others as well many others who are working in palliative care. And I want to draw attention to that because I think, the palliative care has a certain kind of stigma about it where people think it's all about end of life, but I don't think it actually is about that. And I think that palliative care is about living the best life you can live today, given your circumstances. And I heard something recently where somebody suggested that instead of going to your doctor's appointment and thinking about what's your biggest problem today, thinking about it in terms of what do I really want to do? What am I really interested in? This is challenging maybe with regards to apathy, but instead of thinking about the negative, what am I too disabled for? What am I abled for? What can I do? What do I want to do? And how can I work to be stronger at doing the thing I want to do? I think it's a subtle change maybe, but I think it's a really important one to keep in mind that you don't have to think about the things you can't do. You can think about what you want to do and how can you get to do that. And I think that's what palliative care is about. Palliative care is about helping you do the things you want to do as best as you can. And I would encourage people that are having this sort of challenge about thinking about disability to consider if there's a palliative care specialist you can talk with. And on that note, I would observe that Benzie Kluger and a team of other experts are working on a study called the COPE PD. That's COPE as in on coping, COPE-PD. And you can search that. You'll find resources. We can put it in the description of this episode perhaps as well. It's a study that you may be able to access palliative care experts through local practitioners that are a part of this study. So do check that out because it might be helpful as you think about navigating questions like the one that our anonymous listener asked.
I think books like the one that Kat wrote are helpful. Books that people write for the Davis Phinney ambassadors. We have lots of books to choose from people who have Parkinson's, and listening to the experience of our fellows, because everything's a little bit different. I talk to people in the UK, Scotland, New Zealand, Japan, all about Parkinson's, and it's very different in each country, Uganda, in here, and there are some activists.
Another thing that has come into us recently relates to the conversation we've had today, and it's not a question, it's actually a comment, and I'm going to read it. Our listener wrote in and said, They just wanted to thank us for the podcast episode about creativity. And they noted that it was very thought-provoking and helpful to them because they're a perfectionist. And the person wrote, "My major creative outlets are gardening and sewing. And I recently purchased an embroidery machine so I could stretch my mind by learning a new machine and a new skill. It's teaching me that it's okay to waste thread and fabric in order to learn and create. And I am learning." I thought this was really relevant to the other questions we talked about today for reasons that aren't that hard to see. But I think, using a machine to sew might present some challenges, but for me, it would certainly be easier to use a machine than to try to sew by hand manually at this point. And I'm sure there's challenges with getting the threads loaded and all that. But this person's willingness to try something and to learn to let go of a tendency that they had about not wanting to waste a little bit of thread is important.
I know for me that when I stopped working as a clinician at the hospital and during COVID, I felt like I needed to learn something new. And so I tackled how to record and put out a podcast. Now, I didn't do fancy stuff with sound and all of that, but it was good for my brain to learn something new. And maybe for everybody, I challenge you, think about what you might learn. Maybe if your hands aren't as great, think about something maybe you can do listening to, just learning how to use your library system and listen to ebooks. Or there's 1,000 things we can do if we shift our perspective to what we can versus what we can't do.
Right. You might even be a genius in the New York Times crossword puzzle because you have extra time sitting still to think about the answers.
Ooh, yeah.
I'm still not like anyone will ever call me a genius, but I thought it was pretty funny. Some people have to compartmentalize these things. They don't have time to figure them out or do the research.
Or maybe you'll find that you're an expert at making your own game. Come up with your own game that is a new thing for yourself that you enjoy to do, and maybe you quiz your children or your grandchildren. And I just keep finding all these new games that are coming out in the style of Wordle and the category matching word game that's in the New York Times now. I think there's all sorts of things that you can do, and if you come up with any new activities, we'd love for you to share them with us. So please write them in. Again, so you can send us your questions at dpf.org/unfiltered, and you can also send us your comments there.
How about the game of stop, drop, and roll, or the game of unfreeze?
Red Rover, Red Rover.
Yes, there it was. It was in my head, Chris. I love it. And I'd love to wrap up with us thinking about something that Heather brought up. I want everybody to be thinking about what's your juice list. What are the things that give you oomph? Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks, Heather, and thanks, Chris.
Till next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Parkinson's Podcast Unfiltered. Remember, if you'd like to send a question to Heather and Kat, you can do so by visiting dpf.org/unfiltered. That's dpf.org/unfiltered. This content includes information, insights, and opinions from our Parkinson's community. The views expressed are those of individual participants and do not constitute medical advice. This content is not intended to substitute for the guidance, advice, or recommendations of your personal healthcare providers.